Hello and welcome back to Dream Girl. I'm Sheen, your host, and today's episode is brought to you by Muzz, the leading Muslim marriage app. And today we're joined by the incredible Mahreen Munir. So Mahreen is the host of Sheen with Mahreen, which is another incredible podcast in Dubai where she explores how cultures change, how we are, who we are, what we become. And she's also a very, very dear friend of mine. Hello, Mahreen.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, I'm just really excited. And I've known you for like a year now. So
Yes.
I know this is going to be a really smooth conversation. Like we were talking about how even before coming here, I felt very calm because I was like, it's just so easy to talk to you. So I'm sure it's going to be fun. Yeah.
Oh, you're so sweet. I think we need to address how this is a full circle moment for us, right?
Yes.
A year ago, you reached out and I came on your podcast as a guest. You were the first podcast I came on as a guest in Dubai. And I remember we were in the same studio, sitting in the same spot. You know, it was the first time I came to this particular studio because I always used to be next door, right?
Oh, yeah, true.
And then I was like, oh, this is actually nice.
Oh, so I introduced you to the studio
You
in a
did.
way.
And show them the phone case. I love your branding. So if you're not already, please listen to Sheen with Mahreen.
Yes.
We had a lovely chat. And you're wearing the same outfit as well.
Yes, I was just saying that like we're doing a full circle wearing this same exact outfit I wore 1 year ago. 1 year later, that time it was on my podcast and now I'm on your podcast. So it's fun. It's very fun.
So nice. But also I want to ask you, because you started the podcast and in a very short time you blew up. You're doing incredible work and, you're meeting all these incredible guests. And I honestly love the conversations that you have on the podcast. And it's so nice to see, the success that you are getting. It's very well deserved. And I want to ask you, how does it feel?
Thank you so much. I mean, same to you. Like you're doing incredible. And I mean, it was a year ago when I reached out to you and you were already an inspiration, and now a year later you're doing even better, and that sounds impossible, but you're doing even better. So like congratulations to you.
Thank you.
But how does it feel? It's very exciting. I think it grew much faster than I thought it would in the past year. So there was a lot of things that I wasn't mentally prepared for, but I took it one day at a time. It's been a lot of fun. The people that I met, I became friends with. So I've had the greatest experiences with all the different guests that I've had, learned a lot, and I'm excited for the next step. So I'm having fun. Yeah, it's been fun.
I know. And also for context for everybody, you're still at university, aren't you? So you're probably one of the youngest guests we've had.
Oh, wow.
If you don't mind sharing, how old are you?
I'm 22.
Okay, basically child, right? Okay, so...
I am an adult, okay? I am legally an adult.
Okay, sure. But so let's dive into what we're here to talk about today, right? We want to explore a little bit more about, in today's time, what is it like to find a partner and getting married, especially as young Muslims. So from your experience of being around the youth, how do you see your peers and yourself approaching this whole topic of finding a partner?
I think the youth today, especially in our culture, they approach the topic of finding a partner in a very secretive manner. The thing is that the youth are very, very private about these matters, and it's because of the way we are raised. It's because of our culture. It's because we're told that this is something that you do when you're older. When you're younger, you need to focus on your education. So we are brought up in that way. So if we do have feelings for someone, if we do find someone that we're interested in, it's always a secret. And I grew up seeing that, like all the peers, all the friends around me in high school, they were in relationships that were private, that no one knew about except for a few others. It's not healthy, but that's what I saw. And unfortunately, the youth today, that's usually what they end up doing because of the culture. I'm specifically talking about
the South Asian culture.
Yeah, I'm talking about here, South Asian culture. Not just South Asian, I think also in some Arab cultures it's like this. But so it's funny because in high school there were some people that I knew who were talking to someone, texting someone. They liked that person. They started having conversations with that person. They started dating that person, but they've never met them in real life because they don't get the chance to actually meet them in real life. So it's funny because a lot of the relationships amongst the youth is online. It's through texting. It's like you're dating someone through a screen. And that's the reality of it because people want to keep it a secret. So I've had a negative perception of relationships, dating as someone who's young because I've always seen it as a private matter and as something forbidden in a way.
Okay, so I'll give you a bit of perspective as someone who's an actual adult, right? So
Excuse me.
So, it's so funny because growing up, I had the same experience as you, right? So being in the South Asian community, you are relationships are shamed when you're young.
Yeah,
like you're not allowed to talk to boys. Don't become friends with any boys out there. Boyfriend is out of the picture, right? Like that's just not even considered real. And as you said, a lot of people do it. And I watched this video yesterday of this girl saying how when I was not allowed to have a boyfriend in high school, I had many boyfriends. Now that I am allowed, I don't know how to find one, right? And it's crazy because we grow up with that perception that you should not talk to the other gender, don't become friends with them. And then suddenly, you after you're done with university, everyone is like, where's the husband? You need to find someone. Why haven't you found someone yet? But you don't even know how to talk to the other gender at this point.
That's what I find so funny because they tell you to not talk to anyone for like 22 years of your life. And then all of a sudden, they're like, where's the guy? Like, he's in your pocket. Like, like, where's the guy? Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? I was a good child and I followed your instructions and now you're asking me, where's the guy? I think in my family, it was different. Like, my parents were always encouraged me to be friends with boys, girls, everyone. They were very open about it. But I'm generally talking about what I've seen around me where, there are certain parents that, tell them you can't even talk to a boy. Like I have some friends even today who don't tell their parents that they're hanging out with a group and that group involves a guy.
Boys, yeah.
So until today, when I'm like the people I hang out with are above 20.
Yeah.
We are adults, okay? So so I think that's very much ingrained in the culture, and because of that people rebel. Like, as you said, when you're younger, you're told not to have a boyfriend, but usually those are the children that have many different relationships, unhealthy ones as well. And what's interesting is that a lot of times when you're young, if you don't find the affection at home, if you don't find some sort of love or attention or affection at home, then you try to find it elsewhere, and sometimes in unhealthy ways elsewhere, outside, through boys, and even if the boy is doing like the bare minimum, like he just says, oh, your hair looks pretty, and you go like all crazy for it, like that's not a good relationship. You know what I mean? But the upbringing and the way the household is run does affect the type of relationships you then have. Agreed.
And I think that's so important because, as you said, and for me, a lot of my friends who had secret boyfriends when we were in school ended up marrying these boys.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, and then my parents will be like, well, they got married. And I'm like, but I was being a good girl, But that's the thing. My parents were the same. There was never an issue to have male friends, right? So I grew up having a lot of male friends. And even now I have a lot of male friends and female friends. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's good to have the balance. But still, do you think that there is a correlation within the South Asian community, especially with our friends and everything? Do you see that because we put this kind of like strain on kids when they're so young that, relationships is bad, don't do this, don't talk to the other gender, then it becomes really hard for them as adults to now date. And they don't know how to approach someone in a proper way, for weddings, for marriage, for getting to know each other like that, and not just be friends. Because now what a lot of people do is that they don't know where the boundary is between friendship and not friendship.
Exactly. I think that very much exists. Like I've met a lot of guys even today in uni, outside of uni, where I could tell that they never talked to a girl before. Like you can just tell. This is for both boys and girls. When you are restricted of the ability or the environment where you're exposed to both boys and girls, you don't know how to talk to the other gender. You think of the other gender as this like special species, like you consider, like I remember in a few years in my junior school, there was a time, I mean, eventually it changed, but there was a time where they separated the boys and girls. And during that time, I still had friends who were guys, but I had some classmates who didn't have friends who were guys. So the way they talked about boys were like, even when a boy would would walk outside the classroom, they would be like, oh my God, what is this? Yeah, it's an event. Like it's a new species that is walking outside of the classroom. So we approach the other gender in a very
inflated way.
Exactly.
Right?
And we think that they are not in our access in a way that they're like the way we talk to girls is not the way we can talk to them. We cannot be ourselves. We can't be normal with them because we have to, put on this image or outlook when we talk to a guy. And it is true, the way you talk to girls and boys, of course, it is different in some way or the other, but it's very extreme when you aren't in an environment that is with both boys and girls. So then you grow up, and when you do get access to that environment, when you do get exposed to that environment, you have no idea how to act. And I've seen boys like that, like they don't know how to talk to me. And also I think they get intimidated a lot depending on the girl. But one, they start getting intimidated by girls, and two is that they think the way they talk to boys, the way they make like stupid jokes with boys, they can make the same way with girls, but they don't realize that there are certain things you can't say in front of a girl. They don't know the limits. That's what I'm trying to say. So it very much exists that when you grow up, you eventually are not able to understand how to interact with the other gender.
Okay, so you've talked about so many interesting things that I want to deep dive into. So, for example, the whole putting up with toxic relationships, because depending on how you grew up, what are the traumas that you carry and things like that. And you talked about how we interact with each other. And also, I want to talk about a little bit about the digital age, right? So I know you said earlier that a lot of people have digital boyfriends and girlfriends, right? Which is fine. But I think that today with, the access to like social media and all the apps and everything, a lot more people are accessible to you. But they're also not, right? When you think about it, in our generation, we are more connected than ever, right? Digitally. But we are also struggling to make real life connections. And I think that also impacts when you're looking for a life partner, right? So in the future, when you're doing like halal dating, trying to find someone to get married, it gets hard because I think for me, it's two reasons. Tell me what you think. I think it's, first of all, we think that the grass is always greener. And there's so much access to people that if this one doesn't work, there's no need for me to put in a lot of effort. I can find someone else. And the second thing is we don't know how to build like connections anymore because we just refresh and we see other people. So there's no need to actually put in effort to build a relationship. What do you think?
I think that, so one of the things kind of outside of the 2 points that you mentioned, but one of the things that when you are used to or accustomed to digital boyfriends, digital girlfriends, talking to people over texting, things like that, that also contributes to you not knowing how to interact with people in real life. I think that also affects the interactions, and that can also affect the way relationships then form when you meet them in person. A lot of people, young boys, young girls, they're so used to texting each other on Snapchat, on Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever, that when they meet in real life, they don't know how to talk. Like they have no idea, they feel shy. Like I understand that, there's nerves or whatever, but they have no idea how to talk because texting and talking in real life is two completely different forms of interaction. So I think texting can affect the way the relationship in that way, in the form of interactions. The second thing that you mentioned about how you can't you can create meaningful and deep connections with people. I think that, and I can't say this from my experience. I can say this from the stories that I've heard. And I did have a guest on the podcast. She used to use an online dating platform. She found her husband through the platform. And I'd asked her a similar question where I was like, do you think that you can't really find right people? Like, it's kind of luck, like it's once in a blue moon, her situation. But she was like, consider using these platforms the same way in which you would, I don't know, go to a networking event or any kind of event, trying to find different people. So, for example, when you're in real life, you meet one person, you kind of like that person, but you're not sure, not too sure. You meet another person, you meet a third person, you meet people in your life, right? It's the same way through the platform. You are meeting people, multiple different types of people. Why do you think that all of those people will be perfect?
Yeah.
They're not. And that's the same way in real life. You're not going to find perfection in every single guy that you meet or girl that you meet. So I do still think that you can find meaningful connections. You can create meaningful interactions through these platforms. I can't say from experience, but from stories, I do believe there is possibility in it, depending on the way we use it. It's so dependent on our intentions, how we're using the platform. That has everything to do with what relationship you end up forming. Because I don't want to bash the online world. I don't want to bash the internet, because I was born into it and this is all that I've seen, and I want to make use of it in the best way possible. So I don't want to talk about how, like, I don't want to bash it. I want to talk about how we can actually make better use of it. And the only reason I think that people end up not creating meaningful connections or finding weird people online is, one, their intentions when they use the app. Is it for a hookup, or is it for like
marriage?
Is it for marriage?
Yeah.
Exactly. So is it for a short-term thing, or is it for a long-term thing? Like, your intention matters with when you're using the platform. And the second thing is also just how you're communicating with the people. What are the types? What are you looking at when you're swiping? When you're saying yes to a person on the platform? Is it purely you just look at their looks and you're like, this is like a fun thing, or are you looking beyond, So I think it has everything to do with your intentions. So you definitely can create meaningful connections online. Just use it the right way.
Yeah.
That's all I'm gonna say.
That's such good advice. And I like what you said, because I completely agree that I have so many friends who actually got married through the online apps and stuff like that, right? And you can see that it can happen that way.
Yeah.
It works, right? And when you think about it in our modern times, like, look at me and you. Okay, not you, because you're still at university, so you have access to people your age a lot, and from both genders as well. But once you join the workforce, and after that, it's really hard now. If you're looking to get married to someone, the likelihood of you meeting someone who ticks all the boxes that you're looking for and is in the same physical location as you does go down a lot. And now, if you have a very hectic schedule, where do you find the time to socialize, to meet other people? So it gets harder and harder, which is why the other alternative to using an app is using the traditional matchmaking, going through the parents. But I feel like our generation is a little bit less open to that, just because I think there is a divide between what we look for and what our parents think we need.
For sure.
Because there's the very different school of thoughts. You've grown differently to your parents. You have different life experiences. So they might not necessarily appreciate the kind of like nuances of what you're looking for in a life partner. So that's why I feel like the apps do work in that sense. And as you said, it's all about how you set your intentions and how you use it. And as they say, you know, you need to go through a lot. So it's a numbers game. So sometimes you just have to do it. Just have to be patient with it because it's not going to happen overnight. So yeah, that's great. Now you touched on something as well where you said that, you know, it depends on when you're on the app, what criteria are you using to choose somebody to meet. And I think let's talk about that a little, especially when it comes to like the South Asian community. If we think about what are the expectations in terms of what a potential partner should look like, how is that different for men and women? Do we still think that, like, have you ever heard someone saying that, you know, you need to look for a handsome man?
No.
Right? No one says that.
Rich man. That's all I hear.
He's well settled.
Well settled, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And actually, it's not just that it's not that they never say look for a handsome man. They actually say don't look for a handsome man. Don't care about looks. You should not be looking at looks. He can be ugly as hell. That does not matter. Like that's what we're always told. Like I grew up being told this. I grew up hearing this, hearing other girls being told this. So in our culture, but I think it's not just in our culture. I feel like generally it is true that men do care more about the looks of a woman versus women, because women care a lot more about, they compensate for the looks through other things. Like if the guy's funny, if he has humor, he has charm, he has personality, I feel like women are more likely to compensate for the looks through that. That's what I've usually heard through people as well. So I do think I think that exists. I personally think I would do that too, as in I do care about looks. I do care about, I mean, of course, he should look nice.
Right.
Of course, like that's the basic. But if he's funny, if he makes me laugh, I feel like that's more important. And that resonates with a lot of women. I don't know if you agree, but a lot of women relate to that. But in our culture, if I talk about our culture specifically, what I don't like is how they tell a woman to not care about looks at all. Like that should not even be something you consider. And to a man or to a boy, they always say that the only thing they actually talk about to the guy is her looks, is how fair she is. I mean, even how her hands look. Like it's yeah, I know it's crazy, but I hear this, like how her hands look, how tall she is. Like it's so
Do my hands fit?
Me and my sister, we used to make a joke that if we, I don't know if as a joke, if we do, like, we put nail polish, we do a manicure, pedicure, we're like, oh, we're marriage material. We're marriage material now. Like, we always think this.
Look at me with my little hearts. I'm basically there.
You can get married. Oh, yeah, you're ready. You're prepared. But yeah, like, guys are told to look at all of these things, and even if they're not explicitly told to look at her hands or whatever, but the mother or the parents, they are looking at that. I'm specific talking about usually in arranged marriages.
Yes.
Because that's, until now, that is still in our culture. It's very present in our culture, arranged marriages. So
wait, I want to add something to that. So I think it's not even just arranged marriages, right? So when I was at university, there was a girl who I knew, and she started getting to know this other guy, Muslim couple. They liked each other. And then obviously they took it to the parents. And oh my God, I remember I was so heartbroken for her because he came back saying, I'm really sorry, but my mom says that she expected someone who's better looking for me. How horrible is that?
Oh my goodness. That's and did it happen? Like,
no, obviously they didn't.
It didn't?
No, it didn't.
You know what's funny to me? I see this a lot. That the mothers, they create their own standard of beauty that they impose on the son. So even if the son finds someone attractive, finds someone beautiful, you know, for him, he likes that woman. He thinks she's stunning. He wants to marry her. But but that standard of beauty would not fit the mother, and they
No.
would disagree. And that's what I don't appreciate. It's true that does happen in all types of love relationships, but what I'm trying to say is that regardless of arranged marriage or love marriages, when the parents impose a certain standard on their children, I know it's with the right intentions. Like,
Of course.
Our parents have the best of intentions. That's for sure. That is a fact. But there is some problems to it. There are some problems to it that we should acknowledge. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging it. And one of it is that they tell their daughters not to look at the looks, to only look at how much money he makes. Okay, if he's nice, like if he's kind, like if he's kind, okay. He may be funny, that's fine, but if he's well settled, I think that is the most common question the parents would ask. I know it's with the good intention, but there's so much more to that that any person would desire.
Right.
There's so much more to that. Same goes for a man. I think that's why a lot of men, they end up being so, in our culture, they end up being so shallow or arrogant, because they grow up being told they are perfect, they are so handsome, they are like the son of, I don't know, a king, and so they're so perfect.
They deserve the world.
And so they deserve a woman who is also very fair, very beautiful, very, I don't know, long hair, beautiful hands, all of that. And so that also affects the way men then behave when they grow up. They then have like these ridiculous demands and requirements when they want to marry. So yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that whole concept of imposing these things on the other is so wrong.
I know.
And there are different things that men and women would desire in the partner. That's true. But we take it to the extreme. That's my issue.
I agree. And I think you're so right, because I've also only heard, is he well settled? Whenever like a girl will tell her friends or her family, I've met someone, the first question is, what do they do? Right? It's never, what does he look like? But when a boy says the same thing, it's always, show us a picture. What does she look like? So unfortunately, there's these standards for both genders. And I guess, if you think about it in terms of like the traditional roles and even Islamically what is expected and stuff, it makes sense that the man should be well settled, to be the provider of the family. That's fine. But it's not the only criteria, right? Even if we're speaking Islamically, it's like, do your faith match? Do your values match? All of these are also
compatibility
as important. Exactly. Do you have chemistry with this person?
Yeah.
Because all of these do matter. But for women, for some reason, as you said, we've been trained from a young age to be told that, whenever you go to a wedding, what will you hear about the bride? She's so pretty, she's so fair, and she's so young, and all of these things that come out. And this obsession with fair skin is so annoying. And I'll give you context, because, I'm from Mauritius, and we are like generations and generations ago, we were Indian, right? But we can't even trace back where we're from in India. Somehow the obsession with fair skin managed to make its way still to us. I'm like, why was this not left behind like everything else? But it's there even now. I have a friend who, I'm not even going to go into details, but I have a friend who said that the only thing he wants in a wife is fair skin. And he's someone I grew up with. Okay, he's a friend. And I was like, how are you thinking this way? Right, Bama, how are you thinking this way? Because I thought we're so far past this. But then the argument that always comes forward, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is that, well, it's a preference. Just like, girls want someone who's tall. We just want someone who's fair skin. But they don't understand where the obsession with fair skin comes from.
Honestly, I think I've heard men always say this. Like, I've had debates with some family members as well, and they talk about their requirements, their demands. Some of them have said, "Oh, I don't want my wife to work," things like that. So, and whenever I've argued with it, the response is always that, everyone has their own preferences. It's true, everyone has their own preferences, everyone has their own, likes, but you need to understand that how shallow one can be when all you're looking at is the skin of a person, the color of someone's skin. There are hundreds and thousands of women out there who may have fair skin. Do you think that you're compatible with all of them?
Everyone.
Obviously not. So that's obviously not the only thing you should be looking at. Obviously, you need to have other things to consider, like the chemistry, like her values, like her work ethic, her all of those things are important. And men who haven't had conversations with women, who don't have a lot of experience with these kind of relationships, they just repeat what they've been told growing up, and usually it's that she should be a fair woman.
Mm-hmm.
That and only until and unless you actually have interactions with women, you meet them, you have some experience trying to find someone, so you have some relationships, things like that, then you will start to realize that not all fair women are compatible. You know what I mean? Like, it's so ridiculous to think, like, it's so basic. Don't you think this is so basic? I feel like it's such a basic thing to be talking about, that you should have more than one criteria when you're looking for a person. Right. Isn't that so basic?
It is.
But yeah.
But also, the obsession with fair skin comes from us being colonized people. That's all it is. I'm like, you are literally carrying your internalized colonization through generations and generations and generations, because somehow we think people with fair skin are on a higher level than everyone else, which is absolutely bonkers. But moving on, there's something else I want to speak to you about, right? So I don't know. I mean, you might be a bit young to experience this, but I'm sure you've seen it around you in the culture, that there is this notion of aging out of the marriage market, right? And for some reason, especially when we're talking about women, because for men, I feel like however old you are, nobody worries, right? They're like, you will find someone. You can be 40 and find someone in their 20s and get married. But for women, somehow 30 is like your death age. That's it. What is going to happen after that? What's your life worth after that, right? And whatever you've achieved, whatever you've done, you are still tagged as a loser if you're not married, because marriage is kind of like seen as the
ultimate achievement
trophy, right?
Of a woman,
that's the ultimate. I mean, not even, right? Once you're married, they're not going to ask you for the kids, right? So, but how do you think we can get away from that notion of, stop putting that kind of pressure and expectation on women to get married before their 30s? Because look at you, right? In your 20s, you are building. You have so many things you want to do. You're interested. And it doesn't mean that if the right person comes along, you're not going to get married. That's absolutely fine. But doesn't mean that you're also actively looking, right? And I think that's what happens to a lot of people now, because our 20s are for us to go to university, to upskill, get a job, quit that job, get something else, start content creation. And that's when everyone is exploring
the squiggly
themselves.
Career.
Yeah. So you're exploring yourself, because when else will you do this? You have no responsibility. You're as young as you'll ever be. And then in your 30s is when people are starting to get married. But I feel like our culture still sees that as something negative.
Yeah. It's definitely true that when you're an older woman, it's always seen very negatively if you're not married. If you're an unmarried older woman in your 30s, it's always seen negatively in our culture. It's true. The way to change it, I truly think it's a generational shift, and I think it's something that would take time. It's not something that we can just click on a button and then the minds of our parents, of our grandparents would change. And I do think that there's this quote that one of my friends said, which I really like. I'll make it relevant, and it's that I don't know if my parents are the best parents, but I know they are better parents than their parents were. And it's so true, because they are learning and unlearning the things that their parents have taught them, and then they're, continuing their generation. and then we will do the same with our kids. So because of that, because of what I just said, that it's a generational thing, it's a generational ideology that's been passed down for ages, and it's continued to be passed down until today. We still see that so prevalent in our culture. So I truly believe that the way to really change it is through our generation. It's a generational shift. It'll slowly change. It'll take time. It's sad that it exists, but I can't help but say that it's a generational shift, that we have to wait. We have to be patient for that to change. And I completely agree with the idea that, so when I was younger, I always saw young women being married to older men, right? Like that's all that I saw always. Like all the marriages around me, all the relationships around me, it was like a young woman in her 20s and an older man late 20s, early 20s, late 20s. That was what I saw. And so I always hated it because I was like, what about like her university? What about her career? And every time I saw it, it was usually that the girl wants to be a housewife and the man would work. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. What I'm just saying is that I didn't want to be that. I want to work. And so I always had a very negative image of marriage because of it, because I thought when you're like 20s, like, okay, I need to be thinking about marriage. And so for the longest time, I hated the idea of marriage even. Like I hated the word marriage because I was like, that means when I'm 20, it's like, it's my time. You know what I mean? But as I turned 20, I'm blessed because of my parents. I'm blessed because of my family. They understand that I want to work, and they're like, they've given me this opportunity. But a lot of women don't get that. And it's so important in the early age, your early 20s, to be building yourself, to really be understanding yourself, to be understanding the career that you want to be. Because I've seen relationships where there are girls who get married in their early 20s. They want to work. They haven't figured out what they want to do, but they want to work. But before they figured that out, they get married, okay? They get married, they're happy, they're in love, that's great. But then that confusion, that sadness, that, all the chaos before comes back, because now you're like, all the honeymoon phase is over, all of that is over, now you're like back to reality, and you're like, what do I do? Like, I want to work, but like, now I'm staying at home all day. Like, what do I do? I see that so often. So that's why I think it's so, so important, especially if a woman really wants to work, for that time period to figure themselves out, try out some careers, test out different options, and then get married. I don't know if you will ever be ready for marriage. Because I know I get asked all the time, are you ready for marriage?
Yeah.
I know I'm not ready right now, but sometimes I think like, will I ever be ready for marriage? Like, is there ever a time?
What does that even mean, right?
Yeah, what does that mean? Like,
yeah.
what is that feeling? Because I know even 5-10 years from now, I will still be thinking about, okay, if I'm still doing the podcast, I'll be thinking about the podcast, like how to take it to the next level, how to take my business to the next level. I know that I will always be thinking about that now and then. So I don't know what is being ready for marriage. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But, that's so interesting. I agree with what you've said. But I feel like, so this is something that has been told to me as well, right? Because when I got a PhD, all the aunties were like, well, now your pool is so small. Why did you do this? Like, how are you going to find a good boy now? And then now when you're doing work, and especially for us, your success is a little bit like public, right? People can see how you're doing and they know that you're working hard on it. Mm-hmm. And then they think that, well, if she's so invested in her career and in herself, will she make for a good wife?
Will she make time for,
yeah. Will she be a good wife? Will she be a good mother? And that's another thing where I feel like, especially in the South Asian culture, where we might not be seen as potential good wives because, we're too invested in other things. But I completely disagree with that, because I have a lot of friends who are extremely successful, extremely busy professional women, but they are also extremely homely. They love to take care of their house, they love to cook, and I can tell they will be great mothers and great wives. But finding someone who will see this as a plus rather than something that's going to take away time, and she's not good enough. And as you said earlier on, which is men get intimidated as well by these things. So how do we approach that then?
How do women approach that? Honestly, a secure, confident man will appreciate that. Like, that's what I truly believe, that someone who's really secure in himself, someone who is, like, there's so much debate about femininity, masculinity, but I really believe someone who is masculine, who is confident in themselves, will be able to appreciate a strong woman too. Like, we hear this a lot, but I truly believe in that when you find a strong man, like a masculine man, a true man, he will appreciate you being a strong woman too. So the reason that we haven't found, we don't see that a lot yet, is because we haven't found the right person. That's what I would say. And the second thing, I completely agree with what you said, that usually their mothers, I would say this has a lot to do with mothers, because parents are the one who shape again, you have your individual choices, but parents in our culture do play a huge role in shaping the type of person that the son would want, or the daughter would want. And so the mothers always say, try to find a gharwali, a gharwali ladki. Like, I hear that all the time, and it's like, sometimes I think about it, I'm like, am I not gonna be a good mother, a good wife? Because like, especially now, I don't stay at home a lot. Like, I'm always working. Like, I'm not a gharwali. So I'm like, that means I'm not gonna be a good wife or a good mother. No, I just think that this is a phase of my life that I need to be working. I need to be focusing. I need to have different priorities at this stage of our lives. So the only problem is that South Asians consider this stage of our lives the marriage stage. Whereas I think that this stage should be your figuring out stage. There needs to be that phase in your life. If it's earlier on, if it's later on, there needs to be those few years where it's literally you just thinking about yourself. It's not selfish. It's really not, because it's actually selfless, because when you think about yourself, when you work on yourself later on, when you do become a wife or a mother, you will be a better one. You will truly be a better one. I believe that women who don't have something going on for themselves, as in they don't have like their own life, those mothers end up being too obsessive with their children. Like, the attachment is to an extreme. It goes toxic. It becomes toxic because they cannot be happy until and unless their children are at home. And that's wrong. That, like, everyone should have their own life, right? Like, every mother is a human being at the end of the day. They need to have their own life. So it's so important, that phase that I'm talking about, where you try to figure your life out.
Just a quick word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Muzz, where you can get to know your future spouse Islamically, securely, and privately. It is the leading marriage app with over 10 million single Muslims looking for love. So if you're one of them as well, please join the app, consider downloading it and giving it a go. So for now, we're going to ask Mahreen a nice little question. When you think of Muslim marriage apps, which features of the app do you think aligns more to you that would convince you to use it?
I think one thing is privacy. Like, privacy. I think it's so important, especially in our culture, in our Muslims. When I'm talking to someone, I need to know that it's between me and that person. Like, there's privacy involved. So one thing is definitely privacy. And the second thing is, I don't know if there's a way to figure out the intentions of the person on the app. Right. Like, if there's a way to know, like, this is not some random creepy ass guy that's on the app, like, that would be great.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. Now we'll do something very different. We're going to do a rapid fire. Okay? So it's a red flag, green flag. I'm going to throw some statements at you. Tell me whether this is a red flag or green flag for you. Okay? He wants to live with his family long term.
Red flag.
I knew it. He's a 10, but he's very active on social media.
Okay, I think it's okay, green flag.
Really?
Because like depends on why. Like some people's job requires them to be active on
But
social
if he's
media.
posting, but it's active could also mean he likes other people's stuff a lot.
Yeah, so then it depends on the context. Then
Right?
it depends. Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah.
Okay. He's a mama's boy through and through.
There's nothing wrong with that, but like if it could become a red flag.
It could.
Yeah.
Exactly. It depends
Yes.
what we mean by
It could
that,
become
right?
one. Yeah.
Okay. He has a great sense of humor, but he can't take a joke.
Red flag.
Right.
Like, what do you mean? You can make fun of me, I can't make fun of you.
What is the point of that? Okay. Final one. He is a bad texter, but great communicator in person.
Red flag.
Really?
Yeah.
You like the text?
No, just because I feel like what do you mean by bad text? Like he's ignoring you on like he's
Probably.
acting differently on when you meet face
It's
to
just that
face.
he
He's
doesn't
nice.
text, right?
If it's like, oh, he's just not good at texting, that's fine because I know I'm really bad at texting.
Okay.
But if it's like he's like ignoring you, like you text him like
Yeah,
all
yeah,
day,
yeah.
doesn't want to text you back, like I think that's a red flag.
Agreed. So I think we've covered that. And I guess my final question for you is, do you have any advice for young Muslim people who are looking to get married? What advice do you have when it comes to finding the right partner?
Honestly, I think it's so important to not be pressured into finding the right partner. Like, don't be looking for the partner just because you feel so pressured to do it. Don't accept marriage just because it's a pressure down, like, upon you. Because I know later on, when you do get married, you will face problems because you were not ready before. Like, you genuinely did not feel like it was the right time to get married, but you did it because of the pressure. So I think if you can try to delay it because you're not ready, because you feel like you need some time, then do it. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Do it. Don't give in to the pressure. That's what I would say. And also when you were saying that, I remember you saying that a lot of people who met someone earlier on in their life, they end up getting married to them later on, right? Like if they met him in university, they end up marrying them later on. I think there's nothing wrong with like still actively looking at people while you're figuring out your career, while you're in your university, while you're in college. So, just keep your eyes open and your ears open at all times. Yeah, that's what I would say.
That's really sound advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for coming on the podcast today. This was a lovely chat as usual. And I wish you all the best, Mahreen, with the podcast. I'm sure you're going to do well. And hopefully we'll be back.
Thank you. Thank you very much.